So hello, and welcome everybody to our live AMA here today, where we're going to be discussing the growth of Web3 with Animoca Brands. We're joined by Robby Yung and Harry Lou. So without further ado, perhaps if I could ask you to introduce yourself. So if we start perhaps with Robby.
Hi, thanks, Chaz, for having me here. And just a quick introduction. My name is Robby. I'm the CEO of Animoca Brands. I've been in gaming for a bit over a decade and in blockchain for about half of that now. Since we collaborated, I guess, on CryptoKitties in the beginning of 2018. And most of my time I spend overseeing our investing activities. So obviously people might know us as a game developer, but also we're very active in making investments in the space as well.
Wonderful, and of course, Harry, shouldn't need introduction, of course, with our audience, but yes, please do tell us about yourself.
Sure, yeah, Harry here, CEO of FORJ. FORJ has been, supporting and incubating many of the Animoca Brands projects, and recently we have done the space and the streams with the Pixels, and they are doing pretty well with the Born Hungry activation, the Bold Burgers. We have made over 1 million burgers, right? In the last activation, and recently, we have launched Ape Accelerator, AIP 209, which is going to support ApeCoins and the BAYC IP, which later on we'll be talking about it more. Overall, glad to be here. We have lots of topics to cover, and look forward to sharing more of those.
Wonderful, yes, and for those of you who don't know me, I'll be hosting today. Charles Stanton, I'm the CMO at FORJ, and as Harry tackled there as well, one of the sort of key debates at the moment in the world of Web3 and blockchain is, how do we grow these wonderful ecosystems? There's so many great examples of Web3 ecosystems, and something very close to certainly Animoca's heart and FORJ's heart as well. So we'll be exploring that today with a few questions. And of course, if you have questions of your own, please do add a comment on any of our social channels. We have both Animoca's channels and also FORJ's channels hosting this live stream. So yes, please do ask your questions there. One of the team will pass that through to us. So if we kick off, just a little bit of context here. So recently, on the subject of ecosystem growth and Web3 IP, FORJ were fortunate to win AIP 209, a proposal for an ApeCoin accelerator for the ApeCoin DAO, and a project that's designed to kind of spearhead growth in the ApeCoin community and ApeCoin ecosystem. Again, something Animoca also very close to. But Harry, perhaps if we start with you, if we could just find out a bit more about the ApeCoin accelerator, what it means for ape holders, but also, what does it mean for those perhaps interested in participating in the ApeCoin ecosystem?
Yeah, for sure. This proposal AIP is being worked on over the course of 10 months. Over the last, I would say, 10 months or so, we have been covering a lot of activities happening in BAYC, Uberverse ecosystem. You can see our iconic type IP map we have done, and after that is done, the different ecosystem IP have flourished, and we have seen not just Uberverse, right, IP map, but Cool Cats, Suki, right, and many other more, maps, Cool Cats, and Deadfallas and others as well. So for Ape Accelerator, the purpose is to decide to help strengthen the ApeCoin and BAYC ecosystem by incubating and facilitating projects that contribute and utilize ApeCoin and BAYC IP. So we have seen ecosystems growing very rapidly, but they don't necessarily talk to each other and have strong ecosystem synergy, right? Similar to what Animoca has done. So we want to take what we have learned from Animoca to apply this like to the to the wider ApeCoin ecosystem, especially when it comes to gaming. There are many of these games they already have used Web3 IP, but they do not like commingle with let's say ApeCoins and also storytelling, right? Similar to what 10KTF has done very well. So like what we have seen is that by like creating this kind of network synergy, we'll be able to get this network effect for both ApeCoin and BAYC IP. And the first experiment we have done is with Altava and also with Pixels, and they did extremely well. Like if you take a look at the retention rate of the games, the Pixels did 59% at day 24. And at the moment, shared by Spencer, the gaming officer of Yuga, the heavy metal game also have strong retention when they have this IP integrated, which is about 71% at day one, and then the day two at 87% at game retention. So yeah, like that's the benefits when it comes to integrating BAYC IP into the ecosystem. And right now we have already have a list of candidates. We would love to kickstart in the coming months for the Ape Accelerator. So yeah, like the one end we have the Ape Accelerator. On the other hand, we have the Ape Launchpad. This means that people who own the ApeCoin can participate in these projects, like in different tiers. Like we have the top tiers, and we found the most ApeCoin holders, and then the lowest tier, like for ApeCoin holders owned, let's say over 1,000 ApeCoin as an example. So this is another way for user and the audience to like participate in projects while getting rewards, right, from holding the ApeCoin. This is something that we have done for the last 2 years, like called NFT Launchpad and a FORJ platform, and we are bringing this to the wider ApeCoin community. So yeah, like that's kind of brief of what Ape Accelerator and the Ape Launchpad is about. Yeah, we'd love to expand more in the coming questions as well.
Of course, and Pixels, of course, also being a core part of the Animoca portfolio as well. Really great collaborative effort for that game, and I know we have more to come from the Pixels team. So we love those guys over there. Robby, obviously that was a great overview from Harry on the ApeCoin Accelerator. I know that's something we'll touch on later as one particular way in which we look to grow Web3 ecosystems. But I know Animoca Brands have clearly been huge supporters of the ApeCoin DAO, huge advocates for community governance, and I know that the Mochaverse team over there are working hard to give Mocha holders some opportunities around participation in the ApeCoin DAO. So maybe you could give us a few thoughts around that, how the Mochaverse holders or Mocha holders are involved.
Sure. Well, I think, to go back to the point that Harry was making, I think this is all driven by the idea of how we can use Web3 tools to both engage and reinforce communities. Because obviously in our industry, we talk a lot about community building. And I think the reason for that is because in building essentially open source software, the shared network effects of that software make it as powerful as possible. And so building community and building interoperability and shared benefits of collaborating is a key part of moving the space forward. And so I think what we wanted to do was see how, with the Mochaverse community, how we could engage them in various activities that would engage them as a community. And I think a fantastic way to do that is to start to introduce to a lot of people. I mean, obviously, some people are going to be further along the curve in terms of their level of comfort at engaging with governance and DAOs and things like that. People like Harry do this in their sleep, and then other people are new to the space and may not be familiar with how this kind of governance in a Web3 fashion works. And so what we wanted to do was provide a platform for our Mochaverse community to start becoming active and learning about DAO governance, because we do think that this is going to be an important key to Web3 communities of all sorts going forward, whether they're for, games or PFP projects or whatever it's for. And so a great way to do that was, in this case, to delegate the authority over a certain amount of ApeCoin that we hold as a company to the Mochaverse community, to vote it on our behalf and to have that responsibility to educate themselves and to be involved in making those decisions and to have something at stake. Because I think the important part is that there is skin in the game and that people take seriously the responsibility that they have to participate. And I think that is really what gets people engaged.
Yeah, and I think what's also interesting, Robby, what they're doing over at Mochaverse as well, is that kind of that cross-pollination of communities as well. I suppose there's an opportunity to have active involvement and governance, even if you aren't necessarily kind of an original member of the ApeCoin DAO, having the opportunity to still have some, because obviously it still, of course, will impact them. So is that something you see more of kind of coming down the line in terms of how DAOs are working as they evolve?
Absolutely. And I think also the other reason that this makes for a good collaboration is that actually the ApeCoin DAO itself is one of the more mature DAOs or more mature organizations of its type, given that it has a lot of resources, a very broad membership, and votes very regularly on different events for the community. So it's in the Web3 space, it's a reasonably mature community. I know that sounds funny for something that's only 2 years old, but I do think that you learn a lot, and having those AIPs and those votes all the time has really helped to build a core community that is very motivated to be engaged. And so it's a good role model for people also who are new to the space to see how something that's ticking along quite nicely, how that functions. Because getting a DAO off the ground at the beginning is like any organization. It's hard. People have to devote their time and energy and have a vested interest to go and do it. And so joining one that's quite successful and in progress is a great way to learn.
Oh, absolutely. And I know that's obviously, as well as being huge advocates and fans of the Yugo ecosystem, I know that another reason we felt ApeCoin DAO was such a great place to be looking to grow a community governed incubator, is because of that maturity, the fact that there is that sort of kind of pre-established set of processes and rules that means that more impactful decisions can be made. So Harry, just on that note, actually, focusing a bit more on this idea of a community governed incubator. Obviously, that's the ApeCoin Accelerator. Is really a one of its kind in respect of the fact that it really is designed for the community, governed by the community. What does this mean for the future of the space around, particularly kind of onboarding and nurturing and kind of growing projects, to benefit ecosystems in this way?
Yeah, like maybe I can just share some stats here. So like for our Yugoverse IP ecosystem, like we're seeing the growth of 10%, like month to month growth, like over the last 10 months, right? Which is tremendous, despite being in a bear market. So this means that like people love building on top of the IP, right? In terms of for their PIP, right? From fashion, right? We have the global icons, everyone team, right? And then wearing this with the secretary of Hong Kong government, and I actually get to meet the Hong Kong Tourism Board members in Toronto recently when arrived in Toronto collision. And to local restaurants or in Hungary and drinks beverages, right? So when we see this kind of a growth, it actually inspires other ecosystem too. If you take a look at Mochaverse, we have seen recently our tastemaker members, like James, who also created a map of the Mochaverse too. And we also seeing the projects building on top of the Mochaverse, to showcase the IP growth as well. So we do see that the growth of one ecosystem actually benefits not just one, but the whole Web3 too, because of this shared network effect and the best practice and templates. And this applies to meme lands and too, for what we have done. To answer the questions, and on like what it means like for decentralized IP. It means that like everybody is get to win together. It's like have a winner share all instead of a winner takes all. So the success of let's say Born Hungry actually leads more people to get to know more about BYC IP, and they will want to get some A point right, to spend on the ecosystem, right? And the success of that like makes people want to let's say I want to own maybe an asset first, let's say out of D, but then moving towards they want to get a mutant and then a boy apes. That's what we have seen typically happening in the chats. That after get involved in the ecosystem and they feel they're very welcome and they can find a utility right within the assets they're holding, that they want to get more involved and only more assets. So this is a great way for mass adoption education by getting them to be aware, to getting them to participate, have fun, and then like the whole ecosystem actually get benefits from this kind of adoption. So each of us contribute a bit like in the IP ecosystem, and that's where we see there's like 8 points and as well as like have the Yugo's assets benefits.
Absolutely, and Robby, I suppose the same question to you. Although I'm interested to hear from the perspective of someone who obviously worked for an organisation who kind of makes his business on spotting kind of emerging growth projects and nurturing them and accelerating them and launching them. Obviously, to move into a more decentralized model when it comes to that kind of growth, do you see that as being a logical next step? And is that something that well, it'd be good to hear Animoca's thoughts on that, basically.
Sure. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that we all love the idea of decentralization, and I think that's one of the things that draws people to the space. And I think that it is a great way to empower communities to have more say in where they're contributing value. I think, and that's a key because we definitely view the Web2 model as being a bit more extractive when it comes to the benefits to users and subscribers and players in the case of games. But I think decentralization is kind of a spectrum. And so one of the things that's tricky is that I don't think that, in our view, especially from the point of view of making games, you cannot decentralize too quickly because you need to build up a community, and you need to have leadership in the community, and you need to have people with predefined roles. And so in order for that to happen, it has to happen slowly over time. If it can happen quickly, that's great. But people have to spend time and decide that they want to take it upon themselves to play those roles in the community. And then you can have a strong foundation. I think one of the things that's great about blockchain technology is that it allows us to have these trustless relationships because the corporate governance and the voting and everything is much more straightforward. So rather than, decentralizing over a 10-year period, you can do it in 2. But I don't think that it makes sense, at least from a gaming perspective, to open up a game on day 1 and be like, okay, it's totally decentralized, because then nobody wants to put up their hand and say, okay, I'll take a responsible role here, because they don't even know what's happening yet, meaning it's just launched, it's new, everybody's new. If it's quite established and you know what it means to be a leader because there's already a hierarchy and there's already some history, then people know what they're getting into. So I do think our goal ultimately is always decentralization, but that it does take time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think looking at the flip side of that as well, we obviously talk about decentralization in regards to governance and kind of management of these games or these protocols. But on the flip side, of course, this idea of decentralized IP, like with, of course, Bored Apes and the ability to utilize that IP for your own projects in a decentralized manner, what do you think it's going to mean for the future of creators in this space? The opportunity utilizing Web3 to create these meaningful enterprises using decentralized IP. And I suppose specifically looking at what you just mentioned there, it was a really interesting point around the fact that actually ultimate decentralization isn't necessarily the end goal from the early days. You obviously want to go by a step-by-step process. So in regards to things like decentralized IP, obviously there's going to be some degree of I suppose, confusion around how best to use it. How we should be kind of navigating this space. How do you think creators are going to evolve with the use of decentralized IP?
Sure. So I think decentralized IP is extremely exciting, and I say this having spent the better part of the last 20 years working as a licensee of IP, both in gaming and in traditional media. And I think that this is incredible as an opportunity, because if we see what Yuga and the Bored Ape community have done, I would argue that of all of the many innovations that they've brought to I guess to Web3, but just generally to thinking about building entertainment products, I think it's this idea of shared community ownership of the IP and growing the IP. The BAYC brand grows stronger by every single use case of an individual member with their individual ape. But at the same time, they own completely, as everybody is aware, the rights to exploit the IP of their own individual ape. And I think that that's a stroke of genius, frankly, because it means that the community all benefit from the contributions of individual members, and yet the individual members can benefit more if I start a Bored Ape food truck with my own ape, then I can benefit disproportionately from my own ape, and I get some benefit there. Whereas if I'm starting an esports league using the IP of a video game brand that I don't own, then at the end of the day, I'm still totally at the mercy of the publisher, because I don't own that IP. And I might build a franchise or a community, but at the end of the day, I still, am not in control of the IP, and that's a risk to my business. So I'm basically building it for somebody else's benefit. Whereas I think in this case, with the decentralized ownership, it's fantastic, and I think it actually encourages the faster building of community as a result.
Yeah, it's a really good point around the reward of enterprise as well. Obviously you get much more out of what you put in with that ultimate ownership of that IP as well. Harry, obviously, as someone who's renowned in the space for being pretty much with a finger on the pulse of pretty much everything going on, certainly when it comes to Yuga and decentralized IP, where do you see this space evolving, and what excites you about it?
Yeah, like we mentioned this earlier, because at the moment what we have seen is like many of the project, although we are seeing that like growing, but like many struggle to capture both attention, like user instruction and revenue. So we have one-on-one conversation with many of the builders. Over 100 like conversations before we propose this AIP. We found that it's easy to like say build on the IP. Like you can typically put a BOIC right on a t-shirt, and you can tell the words that you're building on the IP. But it's very hard to really to like bring this to in front of many of others and get them excited. So when we see a natural like have a matchmaking, it's between games and the IP. So they have I would say people have benefits. Number one is the games, right? The games get more Web3 user adoption by leveraging, let's say, BOIC IP, right? And we have seen the game in pixels that people love playing the game because they're on the journey. The journey is they're cooking up the burgers to prepare for the next ride right after the turkey dash. On second hand, the IPs gets more utility, right? So the holders is happy. Third is in terms of getting the user growth, right? We do see like this have an individual that they're not just players, but they also creators on their own, right? So they create content to invite more fans, right, to play. We have seen even in Turkey Dash, right, the ecosystem grew like 40%. In our case here with Pixels, which is like another Animoca portfolio projects, we do see like growth here, which is at about 2,000 new players, right? Every single this kind of activation, which is like impressive. And then fourth is I would say they spend too, like not just like they come here to play, but they want to have an actual experience, right? So it benefits the games to have like paying user. And what we have seen in heavy metals already, right? We have seen 150,000 worth 8 points already spent in the last few days, right? So this is like on top of having strong retention. We see like this is extra benefits that games that drive revenue for the publisher as well, right? So that's a case study where we have seen like games and IP after they combine together to like create this synergy. It's not just like a game to having one content, but you can imagine like having like IP that with like Born Hungry, Serum Energy Drink, and then in the future there's more like, for example, A beverages, right? All these brands are plugging into the game, and after the user like have certain achievement in the leaderboard, then they get exclusive access, right, to attend certain events or purchase certain items. That gives the user a sense of purpose, right, and also sense of achievement too, right, heading into the next journey. So I always say that we are in a journey, and each of this experience is different destination, and we can have destination in the pixels on the other side, and we can also have it on the sandbox too, right? So we don't see them like cannibalize each other, but we do see, yeah, like it's in the journey, everybody, right, get your benefits, right, from playing different experiences in the games themselves, right, gets your benefits from having different unique audience, right, to cater towards it. And like we have launched an experience called Monkey and Wow, right, which is the first, right, one of the first experience that like where we leverage a BAYC IP and implement it in the sandbox, and we have over 150,000 views with like 60,000 kind of unique players. So that was leading up to the Ape Accelerator, what we have done and seen that success, and we're looking to in the like Alpha Season 4 to apply this against it. These are just a few case studies that we have seen like from the shift towards actually using the Web3 IP to benefit the ecosystem.
No, absolutely, Harry. I think one of the things that kind of underpins all of that is around ownership, and actually it'd be great to explore a bit more about what we mean by ownership of digital assets. So that's certainly, I know Robby, something that Animoca are have been heavily involved in over the recent months, and really interesting. I was actually really fortunate to be in London at an event late last year. In the Animoca office, where we talked very much around digital ownership rights and what Animoca were looking to do in the space. So it'd be great, Robby, to maybe touch on kind of where we're at with that and what Animoca have been working on in regards to how we want to frame this notion of true ownership rights of digital assets.
Sure. I think the big sort of milestone achievement of what we've created with NFTs, specifically within Web3, is this idea of true digital ownership. Because at the end of the day, the paradigm shift we're trying to push here is this idea that digital content, has been essentially valued at zero until now because of its ubiquity, its ability to be infinitely copied. And so as a result, it's impossible for anybody to actually build asset value on top of digital items because of that problem. And now that we can express their uniqueness through non-fungible tokens, this allows us to then create asset value there. We can invest in, like we were talking about before, the Bored Ape IP, in IP ownership of unique digital assets. And once you can build asset value there, then it makes sense to continue investing in building that value. So to use a kind of an offline example, when you own an apartment, it makes sense to go and renovate your kitchen or repaint it or invest in building that asset value. Whereas if you were just renting the apartment, why would you invest in a new kitchen? Because it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to somebody else. And now we can think about how we do the same thing in a digital sense. And so as we build that asset value, then the second part of the sort of the flip side of the beauty of building asset value in digital space is in Web3, we have the ability to track royalties. And so this is why another issue, which is quite core and central to our thesis, is the maintenance and protection of creator royalties. because creator royalties in Web3 essentially mean that, when I create something, even if it leaves my hands, and and Harry buys it, and then Harry sells it to you, that I, as the creator, can get a royalty on an ongoing basis that recognizes my original creation. Because what that means is, if there's a stream of royalty revenues, number one, I don't have to ask for a ridiculous price up front, because I will never get anything back again in future. And also, this is a system that we've had already for a century, because if you think about music royalties for songwriters have been collected like this through a clunky but functional system for a century. And so I think this is important, because the idea of creator royalties encourages the interoperability. It encourages us to work together. And this is really important, because if we're going to take down the walls between software, and we're going to really make everything interoperable and shareable so that we can push the progress of software ahead much faster, then it has to be, there have to be benefits to sharing with other people. It can't be a zero-sum game the way it has for the last 20 or 30 years. And so that's why it's very important to protect these creator royalties, because then I'm more than happy to let my creation go free in the world to wherever. As long as I'm getting paid for it, who should I care how many times it resells, or who uses it, or who owns it, because I'm still benefiting from that in the future. It's only if I don't get any benefit that then I'm like, oh, well, I want to make sure to, govern my copyright with an iron fist, because I want to make sure that nobody's infringing my copyright. If I'm getting paid every time for my song, why would I care how many times somebody plays it?
Yeah, absolutely. And then obviously there's so many advantages of digital assets as well. Of course, one being that there's a fundamental lack of degradation in the same way that you would have with your flat, for example. That that flat might need in your kitchen eventually, because otherwise it would just break. And you always have to think about about, as you say, that this idea of every time this asset is transferred, making sure the creator is rewarded. That gives rise to a whole new models, and I know that's something that's really exploding right now. It's super exciting in this space. And I suppose touching on that, Robby, back to you a little bit around education, because obviously, it's pretty clear just from what you were saying there, and the way you framed it, very eloquently. But there is a lack of education, I think, sometimes in not just this space, but obviously beyond that kind of Web3 bubble, as it were, and a lack of understanding of what digital ownership really can mean, especially with technologies like non-fungible tokens and others as well. So I know there's been a huge focus from Animoca on education recently. And you recently launched the Open Campus project, which I appreciate is education beyond just education of Web3, it's education as a whole. But tell us a bit more about the Open Campus project and the Edu token as well.
So I think the idea behind Open Campus was one of the things that we've observed that Web3 does really well is Web3 empowers creators in the creator economy. So we're seeing a lot of applications where Web3 being brought into the creator economy creates the ability. Obviously, it provides the potential for financial infrastructure, so creators can benefit from their creator royalties, as we were discussing. And if you think about that in kind of a in the same way as you think about streaming platforms, it means that there will be a more frictionless way to connect creators and customers or viewers. And that means that there are more revenues going back to creators if there are less middlemen in the way, gatekeeping distribution. And I think that's great. And it also opens up the ability for us to have peer-to-peer transactions. So when we look at the creator economy, what is the biggest contingent in the creator economy? Who is the biggest cohort of creators? Teachers, right? Because teachers are literally everywhere, and there are hundreds of millions of teachers around the world. And so we thought, how can we use the tools of Web3 to really empower teachers as creators? And so we thought one way we can do that is to try to modernize what we would call traditional publishing relationship that teachers have with students. And a traditional publishing relationship is essentially where, an author or a teacher goes to a publishing company, they have their materials to be published, and the publisher pays them an advance on their future royalties, and in exchange for that advance gets a share of those future publishing royalties. And so what we've done is we've encoded that concept into an NFT. So the first project that we launched on our Open Campus protocol is from a company called TinyTap, which is a subsidiary of ours. And they have publisher NFTs. And each of these NFTs represents one class that's taught by a single teacher. And this NFT represents the future royalties on that class. So the owner of the NFT becomes a co-publisher of that classwork and that material from the teacher. So as the students pay for classwork, whether it's games or lectures or what have you, those royalties will then be split between the teacher and the owner of that NFT. And during the process of buying that NFT, the person who purchased the NFT essentially gave the teacher an advance on future royalties through that purchase of that NFT. So we actually have not really changed the business relationship between the teacher and the publisher. We've just kind of democratized it through the very efficient and low-cost tools that Web3 provides us. And so on the back of that launch of publisher NFTs, we then launched the Open Campus protocol. So the token is called EDU. And the idea behind the Open Campus protocol is to build more similar applications for teachers and for education as an industry using these Web3 tools. And so now the Open Campus protocol actually has a foundation, and the foundation is in the process of giving out grants to software developers or educators who are interested in building on the Open Campus protocol. And obviously, if anybody listening is interested in the education field, I would encourage you to go to the Open Campus website and apply for a grant if you have a project that you think might be suitable.
Yeah, and actually, on a personal note, my mother-in-law is a retired teacher, and I've pointed her towards Open Campus as well. I think it's a great model and something she's very interested in. So look out for her submission soon. But no, that's really great, Robby and Harry. I suppose obviously with Tastemakers, which is FORJ's own version of decentralized education. It seems to be very much the kind of flavor of the moment, this idea of kind of decentralization of education. And I think for good reasons. We talk about the future ecosystem growth, that growth can't happen without, really kind of bringing education to people in a way that kind of articulates the values of Web3. So on that note, maybe talk to us a little bit about, how Tastemakers have gone about with the same challenge of how to democratize education, and I suppose, how we're looking to evolve that project as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and Tastemakers, the reason we created it is in Web3, we rarely seen individual participants to really becomes a form of tastemaking the whole experience. Right? So we started back in January with a purpose to turn many of the participants into creators to create three types of forms of content. Live streams, from playing games, doing research reports, right, to doing threads. So over the last 3 months, we have seen involvement from different communities to enter the community. We have seen the successful for the map making, from Mochaban, the James, Meta Passion, from making the Memeland yoga pads. And in the past, it's we are doing this research all alone. But right now, we share this method to teach many of the members in the sessions, how these threads are done, how this research report is made. Then they're taking their knowledge and applying this in their own community. And we're seeing in the Pixels game launch, right, this tastemaker come in and then not just play, but they have fun and share the whole experience from the beginning to the finish. Through different types of formats, right? So the games typically get the benefits of getting insightful feedback. So they know okay, so this is the form of addressing the bugs, and there's a mistakes, there's experiences that can improve. There's the areas that have done well and not done well, and through this type of taste-making experiences, the games that have to have faster iterative looped and to improve. And for individual, they get their personal growth. Right. If you take a look at the journey of Grateful and James Mochaban, from Limpo DAO, They only have in the beginning like only like maybe hundreds of views, right, from what they have written. But over the course of only 2 months entering the workshop, they're able to write threads that get 23,000 have viewerships. Not just like improve their writing styles, but they get audience who actually like to listen to them in Web3, right? Which is the space super scarce, and we're able to capture the people's attention. It also helps them to analyze projects. Right, so instead of telling everyone, "Hey, Bitcoin is going to moon, BTC is going to moon," right? And they use in a very logical way to break down different aspects what's happening right in the space, and it allows the audience to see and to analyze in a critical format too. Like by showing the education can be democratized and allowing this individual to use our format, right, to empower others, right? And we see that's that triggers to the lead to the success of the Pixels game, and also like for like other side too, right? So other side we have a workshop starting like kind of last week with other side wiki, and we reward right the participants who they take the sessions and then do takeaway, as well as like answering quizzes right in the workshop. Like we see the engagements have skyrocketed, and we have over like 300% kind of growth right, compared to the regular tastemaker workshops. So those are good examples that what we have seen. Educations can be in different forms, and like Open Campus I think is a great example, and they recently announced that they have Elite AHK. Also, right, will be educating right how we can use Web3 IP right into the classroom too, right? And so we do see right the knowledge here is like all transferable, and we are catering different types of audience and taking this to the next step.
Wonderful, thanks, Harry. Great overview. And just to remind everybody, please, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments section of whatever channel you are viewing this on. We've had some great questions already. You might have seen me accidentally flash one up. So we'll be getting to that shortly. I'll just add a call to action here. So yeah, please do submit your questions. We'll get to a few of those. We only have one or two more that I certainly want to ask Robby and Harry, and then we'll get to your questions very soon. So just focusing a bit more on the gaming side of things, Robby especially, and I know that when we talk about ecosystem growth and use of decentralized IP, we can't go very far without talking about gaming, and obviously, again, a subject very close to Animoca's heart. So do you believe that new gaming models are going to be developed as a result of digital ownership? A bit of a leading question. I think we know the answer to that, but if so, how and when do you think we're going to start to see this materialize?
Sure. I think you're starting to see it materialize already. And I think a great example is actually the Pixels project that you guys were alluding to at the beginning. One of the things that struck me about Pixels when I first met the team, must be 2 years ago, I think, was that they were focused from day one on interoperability. And I think that really reflects their kind of Web3 native perspective on things. This is a much tougher kind of mind shift to go through if you come from traditional game development. But the idea that you're not just building a community for your own gamers, so to speak, but you're also trying to see how your game environment can cater to other people's IP as well, because those are other communities. And I think the best way to think about it, I try to think about simple examples. If I were building a highway or a racetrack, or no, here, let me think. If I'm building a service station, right, a petrol station, I don't just want my petrol station to service Ford cars. I want to have people who drive Mercedes and BMWs and Chevrolets to come and fill their cars with petrol also, right? It would be ridiculous for me to limit myself to a single brand, but yet that's what we do in traditional gaming. And so I think that the tools of Web3 and decentralized ownership of, in this case, in-game items, allow for a world of interoperability where we can actually tap into really vibrant, enthusiastic communities. So if you look at examples like Pixels or the last season of the Sandbox, for example, there are mechanisms by which we can cater to the Bored Ape Yacht Club community, the CryptoPunks community, the World of Women community, etc., and say, look, bring your IP with you, bring your avatar, whatever, PFP, and you can have a fun time in our game while still expressing your personal online identity through that PFP. And this is just scratching the surface, because obviously from a graphical point of view, a PFP is a relatively simple 2D graphic. But I think it will start to get much more sophisticated as the industry matures, where we'll begin to be able to bring real 3D, photorealistic representations of digital items from game to game or metaverse to metaverse, depending on how you want to define it.
And actually, Robby, if I could just kind of ask a follow-up question there, because it's a really interesting point around interoperability and I suppose the future of certainly how users might participate in these different game ecosystems. But I think one of the hurdles that often is kind of highlighted is the fact that game developers don't necessarily see the value of that interoperability, because they won't themselves see necessarily by adding utility to a particular, let's say, a PFP, they're not the ones getting the royalties from that additional boost in demand for that PFP, for example. Are there any interesting models you're seeing out there, or ways that you think that the industry can kind of evolve to try and make it more beneficial for games to become more interoperable? And I know, obviously, when you talk about the open metaverse and the importance of interoperability, what can we do to try and kind of increase that the value ecosystem?
So I think the important thing for anybody considering to make a game or a metaverse is that you need to have multiple revenue sources. And so, if I'm building a game, if I'm building a racing game, let's say, to keep it simple, right? A racing game, I would have cars and I sell them as NFTs, but I need to have more than just cars. I need to make tracks, and I need to have, maybe entry fees to charge you when you want to enter a race on my track, because that way, if it's somebody who's native to my game, they've bought a car from me and I've made a source of revenue from them having bought the car. But if they're not from my game and they bring their Bored Ape car with them, let's call it, then they have to pay to enter a race. So I will make a small piece of revenue on them actually engaging in my community. But there's also a benefit that's non-monetary, because if they come into my game and play, then that's also more players for the ones who bought cars from me to play against. And that part is important too. And don't forget that the way that free-to-play games have functioned for years is that 98% of the people in there aren't paying you, and they're just coming in and playing. And so this is no different, right? This is how you build community and vibrancy, because for everybody who goes out in a first-person shooter shooting stuff, there is somebody else getting shot.
I love that analogy. Yeah, wonderful. And actually, Harry, just to sort of close out the questions from me. Obviously we've talked a lot about Pixels, and I know we have another great game coming soon from Pixels. I won't ask you to go into too much detail on that, because I know we haven't officially announced it yet, but certainly it's very relevant to this idea of integration of different IPs and this kind of more interoperable kind of way of doing gaming. So do you want to talk a little bit about your experience of how how we found success in bringing that IP into? I know you touched on it earlier, but I suppose it's quite relevant here when we talk about these kind of new gaming models and how you kind of see this evolving.
Yeah, I think the few lens that we can take into consideration, like the storytelling piece, right? So you can imagine having interoperable item is like Easter egg that planted in different kind of games, right? So we can have the same variables that in the sandbox, but different representation within the pixels in 2D. And the user could carry this item, in the let's say they achieve a certain points in the sandbox, right? They can carry this over to pixels and have a upgraded experience, right, from playing the game, right? A kind of booster, right, from the start. And for example, you can have beverages and the summer energy drink, right? Summer energy drink is a good example, right? From achieving the missions and able to find it on the game, right? You'll be able to unlock, right, from buying that drink at the discount, right? For Bored and Hungry, right? after completing the missions, you'll be able to get discount, right, or for free to get a burger, and going to LA, Korea, or Philippines, to get the burgers, right, at a discount, right, and also have an immersive experience with the peers who you play the games with. So that's the power of interoperability. It unlocks the value that from playing different games, right, with the same items that you owned. On the other hand, it's also enable the community, right, to share the experience, right, in social, and that's how culture is built, right. The culture is not formed by in one day, but it's over the period of time. We got to share it on social. We got to talk about it at the same time. We got to actually use it, the items that we have built here, you're seeing the step by step, so we're getting there. Another thing I want to touch based on Pixel is we have season 2 that's coming. So it's not only this first activation we have done, but the second activation is coming too. After this first success, we have different food and beverages brands reaching out to us. How can we integrate the same items to the game too, so that we can increase our awareness and help our next activation. So we have been talking to tens of those brands, looking to insert them to the game too, right? From just from hide and seek, right, an item to creating a full experience, right, which they can have those in the kitchen. So such experience can also inspire other games with Animoca Brands. Right, we have seen Live Beyond already using DIY IP. We have seen Gamey, right, too, already have that too. Towers and Dustland and Wider, and many of the games with Animoca, we really seen the IP synergy that's going, and they're adapting 8.0. Right, so in the next phase, we are looking to see in the Ape Accelerator more games to be accelerated, the integrated 8 coins and more BAYC IP. So that way that many of the audience retain in the ecosystem, and then support future game activation. Within Animoca Brands, within the 8 coin ecosystem, and within Web3 in general. So.
Excellent, thank you, Harry. Wonderful. So got a few minutes left. Appreciate everyone's time. Just get to a couple of questions in the community. So Robby, I think this one was a good start. Let me just move you so your face is up there. So this one comes in from Alex Barder. Robby, doesn't the overall IP value diminish if each Bored Ape owner goes off on their own and starts their own sub-business without a centralized licensing function? So I suppose, just tackling, how we ensure that value doesn't diminish as the IP grows.
Sure. So this is a tough one. It's a tough one because I think we can all imagine cases where somebody goes off and does something that other people disagree with, because sometimes it's a matter of taste. But I think it is largely based in this instance on the idea of community. And so let's go back to the Bored Ape example. There are 10,000 of them out there. And so I think one can easily imagine that the relative influence of a few uses of IP that may be contrary to what the rest of the community feels are good uses of that IP, definitely, would probably not have a big effect. If you think about it, think of a brand, fashion brand, making a piece of clothing that everybody hates because it just doesn't seem on brand and they made a bad choice, right? In the sea of fashion that they create, it's relatively small. I think one of the things that's held back IP in the past has been this centralization of licensing. And that's not to say decentralization is necessarily better, but it's very slow. And the problem is that people who license content will often be thinking much more about brand protection at the expense of innovation. And so they will always tend to be conservative because they're thinking about, oh, well, we have to really protect the brand. When in fact, I think there's a reasonable argument that more aggressive open licensing would actually allow more innovation and more growth in the brand. But we are paving a new path here. So, the jury's still out.
Yes, good answer. Hi, maybe this one for you, perhaps from Andrea. So, what's your take on mass adoption? You kind of alluded to the fact that we've had brands approach us after our first season integration with Tastemakers and Pixels, from Drinks Brands and others. So, are we still too complex, too nerdy, and too far away from reaching out to audiences beyond this Web3 bubble?
Yeah, let's just give another stats here. Born Hungry himself in the Roblox game, they have partnered with McCain Foods, right, which is the largest fries manufacturer in Canada, and that experience has helped millions people who apply, right? So carrying that experience and moving to Pixels, and we see many of their loyal have a user also come to a platform to apply tip. So the combination of Web3 IP not only attracts Web3 audience to participate in many of the Web2 products, but also attracts a Web2 audience to Web3 too. So that's what we have seen in the past that has happened, and we happen more and more, right? UMG, Universal Music Group, using Kingship, right? They acquire Kingship as a brand, and do token, enable Spotify Music. So you can imagine the success of that, would also allow many of the ecosystem players to get token enable music into play too. You can imagine the future where we have Snoop Dogg's concert happening on the other side, happening again in a sandbox, but you get to own a piece of it, because you get to participate in those activation, right? So slowly and gradually, we do see many of the celebrities like Snoop Dogg, Eminem, that get tens of millions of fans, who listen to their music, House I Built. It's a great example from a sandbox. And due to LBC, Eminem track, they sold $28 million worth of sales, right? And that's another great examples, how every IP, enabling mass adoptions in the forms of music, food and drinks, and fashion, right? So the success of a VN team is a good example that not only Bored Apes but also the Cybercoms, like Cool Cats as well as Mocha, can also can be integrated in fashion, right? Cameron Mock, which is a very famous movie stars and singers in mainland China, so I get to wear it in a singing competition. So that is another great adoptions in the fashion field too. So all in all, I see that the ecosystem synergy enable mass adoption to happen. So we are still very early into this.
Fantastic, and I'm very conscious of time, Robby. One final question for you, I think, and obviously be as quick as you want with it. But what are your thoughts on custodial versus non-custodial integrations for games platforms? Quite a big question, I admit. But
honestly, I think it totally depends on your community. I think for the foreseeable future, I would say from games, for games particularly, I think you're going to see a blend of those, because I think it's about catering to different audience constituencies. And there are going to be a lot of users and players who are new to Web3. And I think a custodial solution would perhaps be more appropriate. And then over time, as they become more comfortable with all of the attributes of Web3, they may go to a non-custodial solution. But I think honestly, you have to have both initially, and I don't see a problem with that either. I'm not, I don't think everything has to be decentralized to the extreme.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much. So I think that brings us to the hour. So I just wanted to sort of say again, thank you so much to Robby and Harry for joining us today. And obviously, if there's any final thoughts from either of you before we go.
Nothing from me. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And Harry?
Yeah, I'm just taking the time to appreciate Robby to come to this session today. We learned a lot to learn about the open campus journey, the journey of education, also this decentralization. So when it comes to IP too, from your point of view, and also Charles, thanks for coordinating this. It's really helpful to share what we have learned and then get audience engaged too. In this environment.
Of course, and thank you everybody for joining us. Any further questions, please do drop them in the comments, and my team, Animoca's team, I'm sure will be happy to answer them as well. So thanks again to Robby and Harry, and we will see you soon.
Great, thanks everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.